Imagine a scenario of wickedness and depravity, where humans seek to have relations with angels and daughters and become pregnant by their own fathers. Today, we will explore the story of Lot, a man whose choices placed him at the epicenter of extraordinary events. Prepare to witness the judgment and fury of God that will culminate in the destruction of a civilization. Therefore, I ask for your like and subscription to the channel, and that you stay with us until the end of this story. The first accounts of Lot in the Bible are recorded in the book of Genesis, starting in chapter 11, the story of Lot. A biblical figure begins with uncertainty about the origin and meaning of his name. Some scholars propose that he may represent the idea of a veil that covers, thus indicating a reference to the importance of presenting oneself well before others. According to the Bible, after the death of his father, Lot left Ur of the Chaldeans and traveled to Haran, accompanied by his grandfather. He had his uncle Abram and Sarai with him. When Abram departed from Haran after the death of Terah, Lot followed him to Canaan during a time of great famine in Canaan. Lot and Abram went down to Egypt and settled there. However, after being deceived, the Pharaoh of Egypt expelled Abram and Sarai, causing Lot to return with them to Canaan. During this time, both Abraham and Lot significantly prospered. Their flocks grew to such an extent that the region could no longer accommodate both, leading to disputes among their shepherds. The contrast between Abraham and Lot in the biblical narrative is primarily evidenced by the fundamental choices both make in the face of opportunities and challenges. They present data in their journeys. Abraham is characterized by his obedience and trust in God's promises, which is reflected in the way he conducts his life. His faith directs his choices, and he becomes a remarkable example of an individual who places divine will above his own earthly interests. It is worth remembering the episode of the three mysterious visitors in Mamre. One day, Abraham is sitting at the entrance of his tent under the shade of the oaks of Mamre, when suddenly he notices the presence of three men standing before him. The intensity of the account suggests that these visitors have an extraordinary nature, as Abraham quickly bows down in reverence before them. At this moment, he demonstrates remarkable hospitality, inviting them to stay and rest while offering water to wash their feet and food to restore their strength. It is during this encounter that Abraham and Sarah receive surprising and transformative news. One of the visitors reveals that at that same time next year, Sarah, although already old, would have a son. This divine promise aligns with the previous one, in which God had assured Abraham of a numerous offspring comparable to the stars in the sky. The story of the visit in Mamre not only highlights Abraham's exemplary hospitality, but also reveals the intimate and personal nature of the relationship between God and his faithful servant. On the other hand, Lot seemed to be increasingly influenced by the temptations of the material world, seduced by seemingly prosperous opportunities. For these reasons, Abraham and Lot decided to part ways. At the time of their separation, Abraham generously allowed Lot to choose first the land he would occupy. Abraham's decision to separate from Lot, seeking to preserve harmony and avoid conflicts, highlights the spiritual maturity of this patriarch, who values peace and communion with God above material disputes. Lot chose the lush plains of the Jordan towards the Dead Sea, near Sodom. He is attracted by the beauty and fertility of the region, allowing himself to be influenced by purely material considerations. This decision, while understandable from a human perspective, highlights Lot's vulnerability to the seductions of the world, contrasting with Abraham's spiritual steadfastness. After the separation, Lot settled in Sodom, where he quickly became involved in local affairs and seemingly achieved a prominent social position. However, the Bible describes the inhabitants of Sodom as extremely wicked, a situation that deeply troubled Lot. The Apostle Peter, in the New Testament, describes how Lot was distressed daily by the evil he witnessed in the city. While Lot was in Sodom, a battle occurred in which kings from Mesopotamia defeated the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Zoar. In this conflict, all the goods of Sodom were plundered, and many inhabitants, including Lot, were captured. Informed of what had happened, Abraham organized a rescue force that, in a night battle, defeated the enemy army and recovered Lot's and his family's possessions. It was during this episode that Abraham encountered Melchizedek. Despite the ongoing war involving Sodom, Lot did not leave the city, and his story continues to be told in the Bible. The narrative continues with the visit of angels to Sodom. The city remained engulfed in chaos and perversion. The divine presence in the corrupt city underscores God's concern with human wickedness. This situation resonates with the message of Jeremiah 23:24, which emphasizes that God is attentive to the outcry resulting from injustice. Divine intervention in human affairs reflects God's commitment to righteousness and his willingness to act in the face of evil. The Lord declares his intention to investigate the sins of Sodom, thereby revealing his justice and his rejection of iniquity. However, in the face of such disappointment, God decides to destroy the city. The biblical narrative highlights the depravity of the inhabitants of Sodom, particularly evident in the way they received the angels of the Lord. The men of Sodom, in their sinful conduct, desired to have sexual relations with the angels, a behavior that was one of the main reasons for the city's destruction. During this turmoil, Lot attempted to calm the situation in a controversial manner by offering his daughters to the men of the city, an action that reflects his weakness and the harmful effects of the city on him. At this moment, the Bible delves into Abraham's courageous intercession before the Lord, revealing a genuine quest for understanding and divine justice. Aware of the imminent destruction of Sodom, Abraham dares to question God about the possibility of sparing the righteous along with the wicked. This audacious dialogue resonates with the exhortation in James, chapter 5, verse 16, which highlights that the prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. The narrative continues with the bold negotiation between Abraham and God, in which Abraham dares to question the possibility of sparing the city for the sake of the righteous. Psalm 86, verse 15, reflects this context, proclaiming, "But you, Lord, are a compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness." This reflection emphasizes God's willingness to hear the pleas of his servants and his readiness to act with compassion in response to fervent intercession. The story reveals not only God's compassion, but also the importance of persistence in the pursuit of justice and mercy. When God decided to destroy the cities of the plain, including Sodom and Gomorrah, the Bible recounts a significant event before the destruction of Sodom. Lot and his family were rescued by two angels sent by the Lord. This deliverance occurred thanks to divine mercy and God's commitment to the covenant established with Abraham. In the face of the insistence of the inhabitants of Sodom to capture the angels, they ultimately afflicted the men with blindness. The angels then ordered Lot to take his entire family out of the condemned city. Lot hesitated to leave Sodom, necessitating that the angels physically lead him out of the city during the escape. The family was warned not to look back. However, Lot's wife disobeyed this command and was turned into a pillar of salt. The transformation of Lot's wife into a statue of salt is a dramatic representation of the consequences when we disregard God's guidance. Lot, although spared from the impending destruction, is not exempt from the moral consequences of his choices. His decision to live near Sodom exposed his family to a corrosive environment, and the story reveals Lot's struggle to maintain his moral integrity amidst the surrounding corruption. This struggle of Lot resonates with contemporary challenges faced by Christians who often find themselves in societies permeated by values opposed to biblical teachings. After leaving Sodom, Lot and his 2 daughters went to a small town, afraid to stay there, fearing for their lives. They took refuge in a cave in a mountainous region, demonstrating a hesitation to fully trust in God's plan. This attitude contrasts with the unwavering trust that Abraham demonstrated during his journey, even in the face of uncertainties and challenges. Lot's decision to take refuge in a cave symbolizes, in a way, the human tendency to seek isolation when confronted with adversity. The cave can represent not only a physical shelter, but also a state of emotional and spiritual reclusion. This raises the question of how traumatic experiences can impact a person's ability to fully engage in life and relationships. It was in this place that a terrible event occurred. Fearing for their safety, Lot's daughters were concerned about preserving the family's lineage. Feeling isolated and without the prospect of finding husbands, they devised a plan. At one point, Lot's daughters got their father drunk, and in an act motivated by a lack of understanding of moral norms and ethics, each of them lay with Lot on successive nights, seeking to bear offspring. From this incestuous union, Moab and Benjamin were born, who gave rise to the nations of the Moabites and the Ammonites, respectively. These peoples caused various problems for the Israelites throughout biblical history. The narrative about Lot in the Bible continues to highlight the complex and controversial relationship he had with his daughters after the events in Sodom. However, after this point, Lot's story remains without further details. It is not known for certain whether he was able to rebuild his life or if he spent his final days in the cave in the mountains where the events with his daughters took place. It is important to note that the Apostle Peter mentions Lot in his second epistle, specifically in chapter 2, verses 7 to 8. This passage is yet another reference to the episode of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah in the New Testament. Jesus mentions Lot in the Gospel of Luke in an apocalyptic context, recalling the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot's salvation. This account serves as a reminder for the end times, emphasizing the importance of readiness and obedience to God. The biblical narrative shows us that Lot was a man who had the chance to learn from Abraham, known as the father of faith. However, unlike his uncle Abraham, Lot was not guided by faith but rather by his own perceptions and desires. This personal approach brought many afflictions and left deep scars on his family. The story of Lot serves as an example of the consequences of choices driven more by personal visions than by faith and divine guidance. Valuable lessons for contemporary Christian life arise from this account. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah highlights the importance of making ethical choices, even when faced with contrary cultural pressures. Paul, in his letter to the Romans, urges believers not to conform to the patterns of this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of the mind. Romans chapter 12, verse 2. This passage demonstrates the need for contemporary Christians to stand firm in their faith and moral values, regardless of external influences. I hope that the story of Lot can inspire us. Leave your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click on one of the 2 videos that will appear on the screen to continue watching us. Hugs and stay with God.